The two historians sat in a dimly lit library, surrounded by towering shelves of books and historical documents. They were here to discuss one of the most contentious and complex conflicts of the 20th century, the Vietnam War. The topic of discussion today was why the United States failed to defeat North Vietnam despite its immense military power.
So let's get into it. Why do you think the United States failed to defeat North Vietnam?
There are many reasons, but I think it boils down to a combination of military, political, social, and strategic factors. One of the primary reasons was the difference in objectives and determination between the two sides. For the US, the Vietnam War was part of a broader strategy of containing communism during the Cold War. But for North Vietnam, it was a fight for national liberation and reunification. The Vietnamese were fighting on their home turf, with a deep commitment to their cause, which gave them a significant psychological and moral advantage.
That's a good point. The terrain and environment of Vietnam also posed significant challenges to the US military. The dense jungles, mountainous regions, and complex river systems made conventional warfare difficult. The North Vietnamese army and the Viet Cong guerrilla fighters were well adapted to these conditions, using their knowledge of the terrain to conduct effective guerrilla warfare. They had a vast network of tunnels, like the famous Siu Chi tunnels, to hide, move supplies and launch surprise attacks. This guerrilla warfare tactic, coupled with hit-and-run attacks, ambushes and booby traps, made it extremely difficult for us forces to engage the enemy in decisive battles.
Exactly. The US military strategy and tactics were also significant factors in their failure. The US relied heavily on superior firepower, including extensive bombing campaigns like Operation Rolling Thunder and the use of chemical defoliants like Agent Orange to destroy jungle cover. However, these tactics had limited success in defeating an enemy that could quickly disperse, regroup, and blend in with the civilian population. The bombing campaigns caused significant destruction, but did not break the will or capability of the North Vietnamese to continue fighting. Additionally, the use of chemical agents led to widespread environmental damage and long-term health problems, further alienating the Vietnamese population.
And then there was the lack of a clear and consistent military strategy. The US approach fluctuated over the years, from seeking to attrit the enemy's forces through body counts to attempting to win the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people. This inconsistency often led to confusion and ineffective implementation on the ground. The strategy of attrition, in particular, failed to recognize the North Vietnamese resilience and their ability to replace losses more effectively than anticipated.
Political and social factors within the United States also significantly impacted the war effort. The Vietnam War became increasingly unpopular as it dragged on, with rising casualties and no clear victory in sight. Media coverage brought the brutal realities of the war into American homes, leading to growing anti-war sentiment. Protests, demonstrations, and a divided public opinion weakened domestic support for the war. The draft system, which disproportionately affected young and working-class Americans, further fueled dissent and resistance.
Leadership and decision-making issues within the US government also contributed to the failure. Successive administrations, from Kennedy to Nixon, struggled to develop a coherent and effective policy for Vietnam. The complex political landscape, bureaucratic infighting, and differing views among military and civilian leaders led to a lack of unified direction. This was exemplified by incidents such as the Tet Offensive in 1968, where the North Vietnamese launched widespread attacks across South Vietnam. Although militarily repelled, the offensive shocked the American public and eroded confidence in US leadership's claims of progress in the war.
The role of North Vietnam's allies, particularly the Soviet Union and China, provided essential support that helped sustain their war effort. These allies supplied North Vietnam with weapons, ammunition, and other resources, enabling them to continue the fight despite heavy losses. The US, on the other hand, faced limitations in support from its allies, as many were reluctant to become deeply involved in what was increasingly seen as an unwinnable conflict.
Corruption and inefficiency within the South Vietnamese government and military also undermined the US effort. The government of South Vietnam was plagued by corruption, lack of popular support, and internal divisions. This weakened its ability to effectively govern and mount a strong defense against the communist forces. Many South Vietnamese soldiers were poorly motivated and lacked the commitment seen in their northern counterparts, further hampering military efforts.
Cultural misunderstandings and the failure to win the support of the Vietnamese people were also critical. The US often failed to understand the complex social, political, and cultural dynamics of Vietnam. Efforts to win hearts and minds were often undermined by heavy-handed military tactics, such as the destruction of villages suspected of harboring Viet Cong fighters. These actions alienated the local population, driving them towards supporting the communist forces instead of the US-backed South Vietnamese government.
The Paris Peace Accords of 1973, which were intended to bring an end to the conflict, ultimately failed to create a lasting peace. The accords led to a ceasefire and the withdrawal of US troops, but the fighting between North and South Vietnam continued. The US had significantly reduced its direct military involvement and financial support to South Vietnam, leaving the South Vietnamese forces ill-equipped to withstand the final North Vietnamese offensives. In 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, effectively ending the war with a communist victory.
It's clear that the failure of the United States to defeat North Vietnam was the result of a complex interplay of factors. The determination and resilience of the North Vietnamese, coupled with their effective use of guerrilla warfare tactics, proved formidable against the technologically superior US forces. Inconsistent military strategies, lack of domestic support, leadership issues, and political and cultural misunderstandings further undermined the US effort. The support from communist allies to North Vietnam and the inefficacy of the South Vietnamese government and military compounded the difficulties faced by the United States.
The Vietnam War remains a poignant example of the challenges of asymmetric warfare and the limits of military power in achieving political objectives. It also highlights the importance of understanding the local context and gaining the support of the population in counterinsurgency operations. Without addressing the underlying social, political, and economic issues, military force alone is unlikely to achieve lasting peace and stability.
Indeed, and the lessons learned from the Vietnam War continue to influence US military and foreign policy today. The importance of a clear strategy, effective leadership, cultural understanding, and the need for broad domestic and international support are all critical factors that policymakers must consider in any military engagement.
It's fascinating to think about how the Vietnam War has shaped the way we approach modern conflicts. The complexities and nuances of that war provide valuable insights into the challenges of contemporary warfare and the importance of a comprehensive approach to conflict resolution.
Absolutely. The Vietnam War serves as a reminder of the human cost of war and the necessity of pursuing diplomatic and peaceful solutions whenever possible. The legacy of the Vietnam War continues to be felt not only in the United States and Vietnam but also in the broader context of global geopolitics and military strategy.